American economy is based on consumerism. But having said that, their debt is around 19 trillion. Let me repeat, 19 trillion, T for trillion dollars. And that's huge. Though a lot of Japanese, they've invested, a lot of Saudis, Middle Eastern countries, they've invested, Chinese, they've invested in USA. But having said that, obviously there is something pretty interesting in that part of the world. I was also very surprised to watch a documentary on Deutsche Welle the other day. We used to hear that opium is of prime concern at the moment because they are producing, I think, more than 90% of the opium in the globe, like practically is produced in Afghanistan. Though it is used in certain medicines, but obviously if you want to talk about drugs, it used to happen in Colombia also once they started off that whole story. CIA was involved in all that. But the point is, obviously, let me introduce to the guest, but I'll just take another 30 seconds. A lot of other precious metals, and especially you're talking about emeralds. Afghanistan is the largest producer of emeralds. So when you look at the great game and you look at the potential of certain countries and the way they curtail that potential, that is something of concern to me, at least, as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, my panelists will throw light on that, and they'll be obviously in a better position to shed light and tell us in detail. But the statement again against CPEC means, though the Chinese, they have issued a statement and they've said that this is going to be an economic corridor and this is going to definitely lift the living standards of the people in that region, and around 3 billion people. So that's humongous. Let me introduce you to our panelists and we'll talk about that in detail. On my right is Lieutenant General Talat Masood Saab. He's introduction as a senior analyst. So thank you very much, Saab. We have with us Shahid Kyani Saab, former ambassador, senior diplomat. So thank you very much. And we have with us Dr. Professor Kaab Malik, an IR expert. Dr. Saab, thank you very much. General Saab, maybe I got a little drifted during the intro. But having said that, sir, first of all, let's start off from the statement issued by the US Defense Secretary. So first of all, how would you look at it, your analysis about it, sir?
Well, I think US has been very much opposed to CPEC because they think that China is really a strategic threat to them, and they are not very happy with the close and strategic relationship between China and Pakistan. They think that the CPEC will obviously enhance their strategic position in the Gulf and in this region. At the same time, it will also improve Pakistan's economy and also its proximity and closeness to China, which will give added strength to both the countries and to their policies. So I think it was so obvious and so evident the way that they are going about and trying to sort of oppose. And then, of course, they have an ally with them, the Indians, who along with the Americans have formed a common platform to oppose China and Pakistan. So this is nothing extraordinary or something that has really surprised us. What is surprising is that they have become so blatant and so open about their hostility. Previously, their hostility was somewhat subdued and latent, but now I think it has come on the fore. And Pakistan and China have always been aware of that, and we will have to be very careful because they would like to sort of disrupt and maybe create hurdles as far as this is concerned. But the message that they are coming with, the defense secretary that you mentioned, his visit to Pakistan would also, of course, focus Pakistan's role in Afghanistan. That is their primary object. That's what we think, at least. And if that be so, Pakistan, I think, has made a very bold offer. The foreign minister has said that he is quite prepared to take the defense secretary, Secretary of Defense, anywhere that he would like to visit in the FATA, and if he would see and
the reality on ground,
so that he could see for himself if that is the real situation. So what the real situation is. So it shows that Pakistan is so confident that the allegations that are being made against Pakistan are completely baseless. And so I think if America truly has any doubts and misgivings about Pakistan, it should take the offer in a very, truly in a forthright manner and point out if there are any places where still there is any remnants of the Haqqani network, because they are supposed to have much better intelligence
yes.
and much better means of electronic as well as ground intelligence, so they could tell us if there are any still pockets left.
So you believe that Kensa, once he comes, the sort of concerns the Americans they have with the Pakistani government or the policy in general, sir, that can be taken care of?
First, let me say to you, Mr. Mattis, the General rather, retired Mattis, Secretary of Defense, his presentation to in front of the Armed Forces, Senate Armed Forces Committee, was very, very serious. If you look at what he was saying, so earlier than that, just let me tell you, the Armed Forces, Senate Armed Forces Committee invited a very senior member of the Carnegie Institute, which is a very, very important US think tank, and asked them, what do you think about the CPEC and OBOR? Rather, OBOR. They had the same, absolutely the same concerns as what General Mattis said. And very briefly, before I come to what you had asked the question, very briefly they said that they will be edged out. You see, since 1945 till today, USA has been in the center of global politics.
Correct.
You cannot resolve any issue, right from, you see, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam, Korean, and coming down to Afghanistan now. Now they see that if this OBOR, One Belt, One Road, which is it's a voluntary, let me just tell you, you see where the problem arises is, Americans say that they are compelling, they are not compelling anybody. You see, just like you stand on the road and a bus is going, you want to sit on it, you sit, nobody compels you. But the opportunities and the advantages of those countries from which this OBOR is going are tremendous, and there are no, you see, there are no what you call, like the Americans have these political certain overture. There are nothing of that sort. So the Americans are seriously concerned that if all these countries to which the Chinese have reached out on OBOR become part of it, naturally the Americans' influence, which is already on the wane, will be reduced considerably. This Americans cannot take. So this is something. The second thing which...
But sir, let me add another point here, sir. If you remember, there was this conference held in China a few months ago. Pakistan did attend that conference. The Indians, they did not send any officials. But they did send some of their people from the private sector.
Yeah, think tanks.
So exactly. And other than that, 70 countries, in fact, supported this idea, sir, including UK and so many other European countries, obviously Russian and the regional countries. So just America and India has issue with that.
The thing is, another thing which...
Do you think it is going to dilute the power of India, which the Americans do not want?
Another thing which I do not accept, and I would like my colleagues here to, they said that the Americans are supporting the Indians on this issue of the CPEC passing through disputed territory. What is the whole hogwash? Do you think Americans are going to now start supporting Indians? It's not that thing. It is the convergence of interest.
Yeah,
that is what it is. The convergence of interest. Americans, naturally speaking, as I said to you earlier, if they are edged out, they are now no more the center of gravity as far as the global politics is concerned, and the Chinese, who are on the ascendancy as far as the economy is concerned, if they go there, and any country which would support the Americans in trying to dilute the influence of China will be more than welcome. This is what is happening. And I was just hearing somebody on the television just now, and he was very right. You see, when the World Bank assisted the Indus Basin Treaty and the Mangla Dam was made, it was made in that same area. Nobody objected. Why suddenly? The other thing, sir, the last thing is, why are we so suddenly surprised? Why are we surprised? This convergence of interest and supporting the Indians have been going on since Carter days. And I have mentioned to you a book, and I will keep on mentioning, Stoke Talbot's book, Engaging India. As this is exactly what is happening there. They have rolled out the policy in which they will engage. I keep on saying it is engaging Pakistan. Exactly what they are. What we are saying, and I have heard in the newspaper something very strange. They say, okay, we will stop our, our dependence on the United States. For God's sake, you don't do that. The thing is, sir, countries like us cannot be dependent on one country. We have to, you see, our own alternatives on many countries. Today we think we can
the way India has done.
No, today we think we can ditch United States and go to China. I would just give you one small example, sir. Before, Chinese are very clever. Last year when I went to one of the very big think tanks, they said that we have drawn a line beyond which we will not cross over and try to undermine United States. This is wisdom. We have to be careful, sir. Whatever we do, we have to, you see, think 10 times before we start ditching and then doing this thing and that thing.
Absolutely. CPEC, a project for development and prosperity, that's what the Foreign Office says. That's what the Chinese have said. This is what our official stance is. Well, the Americans, they have a different point of view. So is the case with the Indians. This disputed territory, let's talk about this, inform of viewers about it, Dr. Saab. Is it disputed? No, is it disputed?
Well, in real terms, both what we call the Indian held territory and what they call Pakistan held territory, in real international terms, is disputed. Because there's no resolution to the conflict yet. Until there comes to a resolution and there's an international recognized border, because it's a line of control at the moment and a working border, but it's not an international recognized border, it will be disputed until that is resolved. But I don't think this is an issue in real terms. I think it's also beyond that. I absolutely agree with Kiani Saab here. That we have to understand the geostrategic realities and where we are placed. We're not a great power. We think we are. We have nuclear weapons, but that's primarily only directed at India and no one else. And we reiterate that again and again. And that being the case, that's for our defense. And it was out of the necessity of defense that we attained this capability. That aside, economically, we're not doing too well. And CPEC will provide a great economic stimulus to it. However, in doing so, we can't undermine our strategic relations with other countries and put all our eggs in one basket. And as you also said, we need to diversify as an economy. We need to make sure we have interest parties throughout the world in different parts to invest in this economy and build it up. And this is an impetus the Chinese are gratefully provided us, but it's not going to be the only one. And I think for us to compete on the international spectrum and be in the top 20 in the future economies of the world, we need to diversify and we need to show that we're interested in that, but we need to also provide a good economic, peaceful environment for that to occur, for other people to do so, for other countries to do so. And in this respect, what that requires is that we understand the strategic obligations of different countries. Now, this came at a time when he made the statement about CPEC and Kashmir, because it could have been made many other times. It's also because they want to put more pressure on Pakistan as far as Afghanistan is concerned. We have to link this in. I was reading an article earlier on, and John McCain was talking about that the Americans don't really know exactly how they're going to pressure Pakistan, whether in a coercive or cooperative way for Pakistan to accede to their demands to an extent. And this has been the game that's been going on for many years already. But it's coming to a head now, I think. And if we don't make the right decisions, it may go detrimental to our future interests in the long term. And we're not in the best place for that to occur. I think we need to be able to cooperate with all parties and ensure all parties that we're not in a detrimental space for anybody, and that we are going to participate in the world in a more positive way, and we not just only aim to, we will practically enforce that in our country. Now, the recent visit of General Bajwa in Afghanistan has provided some stimulus to that, I think, and a positive atmosphere for that to develop. However, the way international relations works is that unfortunately certain terms come about where people can be affected by them. Say, for example, many years ago, about a decade ago, nearly a decade ago, Obama introduced the term of the pivot. And there was a reaction by China, obviously, to see this in a negative light. And even though we don't know exactly, they say that this was not intended in the US, but the reaction occurred where that pivot may occur as a result. But then the terminology was changed to rebalancing strategy. What we fail to forget is that Chinese are very much aware of the One Belt, One Road. And as a result, a few months ago, they've already renamed it as a Belt and Road to not indicate that there is one belt, one road. That it is part of the global environment, and China wants to outreach. And it's a matter of perspective, really. I teach a lot about perspectives, about whether this is a win-win or a zero-sum, meaning one wins, one loses, in essence. And it's about changing dynamics in the world where we need to evolve an understanding that this could be an environment where it can be a win-win environment for all. It's about changing the perspectives in the West. Is it a strategic issue? It is partly, there's no doubt, primarily because China is going to rise further as an economic power, and it's projected to become number one in a few years down the line. Nobody is exactly sure if it's going to be 10 or 12 or more years. In purchasing power parity, China is already ahead. But in GDP, it's a long way to go, especially per capita, but it's quite low compared to the West. So it's got a lot of work to do, and there's no guarantees of anything in the future. These are all speculation. You've got to understand, and anything can change on the ground, can lead to catastrophe, or even a complete turnaround. So we've got to be very careful in how we judge a situation, and how this country especially organizes its policy so that it can formulate an understanding that it wants to engage everybody. And that means not disengage anyone, and understand the interests of the other parties, whether it's China or even India. Even though they are perceived to be our enemy, we are willing to work with them, given that circumstances change as well on their side, primarily because one thing we have to highlight again and again is the atrocities that they are committing in Indian occupied
I don't want to
Kashmir.
talk about that.
But the fact is, we need to mention this in light of the situation that we're here. Given that that's the case, we want to engage the US. There's no doubt about it. Majority of our diaspora is in the West. Being an old colonial environment where we have inherited British legacy, which is even the language we're speaking here is a legacy of that. And then we engage the wider world in English. In fact, I meet a lot of Chinese and we talk in English. And as a result, we know the heritage is there, we know the association there. My family is in England, for example, and in the United States and other places. So we have a lot of linkages, a lot of commonalities. And because we have these commonalities, we shouldn't forget them. We have a large diaspora in the United States. Unfortunately, I don't think it's vocal enough compared to the Indian diaspora. And as a result, we're not engaging enough. We should utilize these assets and show them that we're not a threat to anybody. We want to engage, we want to move forward, we want to economically prosper. I think we're recognizing that we're all in the same boat, and we need to help each other through these turbulent times rather than disengage. We don't need to disengage. And it may not be the last time that this occurs. There's going to be upsets, and there always are. It's a rocky sea ahead.
All right.
But we have to work towards a positive outcome.
This last time, or one more time, reminds me of another statement. General Mattis says, General Saab, that we'll try to work with Pakistan one more time. What is that supposed to mean, sir? One more time?
Well, I
Are
mean,
they
it's
giving
a
us
sort
the
of a
final chance or
it
what?
is like sort of a warning that if we don't meet their demands, then probably they will take certain measures which will be harmful to Pakistan. And I think this is the sort of warning that they are giving us.
What could be the worst case scenario in that way, sir? Sanctions?
Well,
What?
I mean, according to them, if they think that we are still harboring these militants and they are still residing here, we are supporting them in any way that is detrimental to the interests of America and Afghanistan, then probably they will think that Pakistan is creating problems for them, and they will then react. But this is not the case. Well, let me slightly come out with my own views on this. The thing is that there are, of course, I mean, we definitely would like to, I fully agree with my colleagues here and the panel that we must have good relations with America. There's no doubt. There can be no two opinions on that. And so should we have good relations with India. But the fact remains that there are certain realities And what is the reality? The reality is that America and India are very unhappy with the way that China is developing its relationship with Pakistan and expanding its influence in the region. And this CPEC project does hurt them in that sense. I think it goes against that policy of how China is expanding its role in the region. And obviously, for that reason, they are opposing it. So irrespective of even if we bend backwards, this aspect cannot be ignored as far as they are concerned. We can give them as much assurance as possible, and yet they will feel that, well, no, I don't think the CPEC project is a good project. You are giving too much of access to the Chinese. But you see, for our economy, for our long-term interests, we are saying that, well, I think it's a good thing. We will make sure we are giving them assurance from time to time that this CPEC is not meant to act against your interests or that of India. And you are even, I think at one time, the Chinese, if the Chinese would agree, we had even said that the Americans could also contribute in some way, and so could the Indians. But that would be, I mean, I don't think that is at the moment feasible. That's only something in the distant future, if at all it ever happens. But for the time being, I think you cannot ignore the strategic reality. This is what I think, but I respect the views of my colleagues. But I think we cannot ignore this, irrespective of how best our intentions are. Because we naturally would like to have good relations with America. We have a history of excellent relations with America at one time. We were the most allied ally of America. But times have changed and interests have changed, and especially in this region. And their failure in Afghanistan has further antagonized them against Pakistan. So I think these aspects are all there. We are sensitive to them. We are doing our best. We should continue to do our best. But I think we still have to be prepared for a certain level of hostility.
Hostility?
Well, I think you can call it hostility or anger or displeasure of the Americans and Indians till such time that our policy practically converges or coincides with their national interest.
So we can't take a U-turn at this time.
No, naturally not.
Now, so the point is that I was watching this interview of Hamid Karzai. He was being interviewed by some Western channel, sir. And he was very, very clearly blaming the Americans for supporting Daesh, rather creating Daesh in Afghanistan, not in one region, but in so many other areas. He said that practically they have been provided with weapons, they've been trained, they've been brought in from Syria into Afghanistan to create more chaos. So this is what is stated by the man who has been the president twice. And
For 10 years.
For 10 years. And during that particular time period when the Americans actually got there and then they operated and all. Now the former president of Afghanistan is blaming the Americans for all the mess in Afghanistan. And the Americans are blaming Pakistan for everything. How do you see that, sir?
First of all, let me say, Dr. Malik has talked about we should be, sailing in the same boat. It reminds me of in a later one, I hope we are in the same boat, but not Titanic. so coming up, talking about what you're saying about the Afghan president, the problem is, I may be allowed to say, I don't trust what President, Karzai was saying. While he was in power, he's on record of taking this, well, he's on record of taking dollars in cash, I don't know, talking about there are no banks and nothing at all, and he takes this money, which was being given legitimate to him by the Americans. Does he have a record of what he did, what the Americans did for him, and does he have a record to show what, Americans...
His brother was one of the major drug lords who was eventually eliminated.
Sir, the Americans spent probably $1 trillion in Afghanistan. Neither the American, neither President Karzai has anything to show what happened. Now that he's out of power, he's now accusing the United States. But there has been reports.
Still, people still believe that he has a lot of influence.
He has
in the decision-making process in Afghanistan.
They say even he's living in part of the presidency. People are talk about that. The thing is that there have been reports even that the Americans and the Saudis and others, they created this Daesh, trying to undermine the governments which they didn't like in the Middle East, especially Syria. But nobody has any proof of that. But it looks a little strange that the American would support Daesh in which their own soldiers will come to harm. So this is something which...
And I'll also, again, the same man once said that, there were hardly a few dozen people whom so-called we consider them as a part of Al-Qaeda. And Americans just entered Afghanistan for no rhyme reason.
Yeah.
They had some other agent, basically.
Well, sir, that is there. Let me just, sir, just take the discussion of General Saab further regarding Pakistan-US relations. Sir, I would say somebody who's a diplomacy practitioner and not a theoretician. Sir, we have to handle Pakistan-US relations in a very professional manner. First of all, sir, allow only the Foreign Office and the Foreign Minister to give statements about that. And we should stop other people from, commenting. I'm telling you, sir, I'm being practical. I'm not a supporter of US or of being, But the thing is, sir, we have to be careful. We have to be practical. We are, look at now in Pakistan, domestically, look at what the US Secretary of State said. They were more concerned about our political stability. You understand?
Look at the statement issued by the World Bank.
Yeah.
So come to that also.
So the thing is that we have to be careful of what we talk about other countries, and then the use of the word nexus and all these things that we need to avoid. We need to engage and look at a country the way it is dealing with Pakistan. Yes,
engage with whom and how?
that is what it is. United States at this time, sir, we now understand the way General Saab was very clearly he said that this administration uses very crude words, very blunt words about any country. Forget about Pakistan. This was not the way in which President Obama's administration dealt with Pakistan. They were also we had very difficult relations, Salala and then the Osama bin Laden issue. But they were very careful with their language. Raymond Davis. Here, sir, the language is very crude. And one thing more, sir, we have to be careful with. The coming years, for us, the difficulty is not only this. For example, tomorrow they decide to unravel this nuclear deal with Iran. It will have serious repercussion for us because we are in this mode of now trying to visibly improve relations with Iran. If these sanctions are put in Iran, will again become difficult for us. They'll be looking at us, are we engaging Iran or not? So, sir, we have to be very careful. So, this time my advice to you is that I've heard that both the senior people from defense and State Department are coming to Pakistan. I think, sir, we need to seriously engage these people without giving any comments publicly and have a serious discussion with them. We should even involve the parliamentarians, the serious people, in a discussion with these people and tell them, look, this CPEC or OBOR is not, as General Saab was saying rightly, planned against anybody. This is something which is Pakistan badly needs to improve its infrastructure. Pakistan badly needs to improve its economy. This is one opportunity in a lifetime to improve the lives of our people, to reduce poverty. You see, we are not ganged up against anybody. Rather, we have been saying all along, and Malik Saab was saying, we said if India wants to join, yes, let them join. But sir, we have to be careful.
They were offered by the Chinese, they refused.
We have
the Chinese premier said that very, very categorically that if they would have joined, they would have benefited more.
Yes, sir.
But still, they can be a part of it.
Sir, we have to, the CPEC remains the right at the top, but sir, dealing with countries, we have to deal with them in a very, very professional and in a very, in which we use our head and not our heart.
Malik Saab, if you look at the recent past, certainly we have seen 3 Hazaras and 2 other people were killed today.
I see.
A lot of activity, is going on in Balochistan, attacks on the military, attacks on the civilians, primarily these soft targets now are being attacked. It seems that, when obviously we all know what Balochistan means for us. To create turmoil in Balochistan, to create more problems for Pakistan in general. And obviously we very I mean, Chuck Hagel, look at the statement he issued once before he became the Defense Secretary. We all know the involvement of India in Kulbhushan Yadav, you talk about so many other factors. I mean, it's very obvious, very clear, and it's just a clear, bold writing on the wall now. But the Americans do not give much weightage to what we say, to our concerns primarily. They're not addressing it the right way. It seems as if they are speaking the language of the Indians. Maybe they're aligned like this, or maybe their interest is so much the same that even whatever we do, it might not make any difference. Agree with that?
Well, the US and India have a strategic relationship. And strategic relationship means right at the top. They have to have an understanding. It's not just somewhere around the middle or the bottom. They have to have an understanding of where both countries want to go and what mutual threats are. And I think it's understood after Obama's speech on the pivot and then rebalancing, etc., that their view, and recently announcements have come, that China is a strategic threat to the United States. And that's fundamentally what it comes down to. And this whole idea of the containment policy of of United States vis-a-vis the Chinese is there for a reason, is to stop future transfer of power towards the East. That would challenge the United States as the global hegemon in real terms. And it really comes down to the way the international state system is molded and how it's developed and evolved over the last few centuries. And throughout history in a way, where the largest power would never want an alternative to challenge its hegemony, primarily because it doesn't want to be number two. Why would it? Why would you expect the United States, that's worked so hard for the last couple of centuries to get to this point and this ascendancy as the largest power that humanity has ever seen and the strongest, to give it up without a fight? And why would anybody without a fight? And it sees that even though this potential conflict may not arise or evolve for a couple more decades, it will try to foment something so it would allow or force China to not be able to go in that direction, or it would cut it at the bud before it flowers. And that's what I think it's trying to do. But that just goes within an understanding of how empires work. You can't expect it to just give way. This expectation that people have, thinking that China is going to rise and everything's going to be happy, doesn't work in the real world. It's a challenger. It's not yet dissatisfied with the system because China in the last 40 years has utilized the current global system to become what it is. So I can't see that it's dissatisfied with the international system as it is. However, a challenge can come in various directions. Before a systemic challenge occurred during the colonial times, the European countries were at each other's throats throughout the world, primarily from Europe, but wherever their interests may lay. And they were fighting each other for centuries.
Correct.
And that wasn't based on system, that was based on ascendancy and control of resources to allow their own country to come to the height and develop it. And the new policy of America First is symbolic of that. Not to allow it to degrade and be challenged by others, because you've got to understand majority of the ruling classes in America are from white Anglo-Saxon backgrounds from Europe. And you've got to understand their mindset and how they literally conquered the United States, well, the States or Americas at that time, which was an empty land with Native Americans, and 18 plus million were killed in various different ways, and plus maybe more. And they were able to occupy the whole country. It was a long endeavor over a few centuries. And they're an expanding understanding of that mentality. And why would they give that up? And they want to be able to control. But this always fundamentally comes down to the concept of power and human beings' innate need to be more powerful than others. It's a selfish interest, and this is a manifestation of that in a larger platform as a country, a large country. And they've done very well, if you think about it. And maintaining that is of the utmost importance of that relationship, because there are many power centers in the United States that vie for position amongst each other, and they challenge each other and they undermine each other, but fundamentally they work to support their system and their hegemony and their dominance over the rest. as they see it. So don't expect them to give up anytime soon. It's a fantasy to think that they will. I just see it in a bookish form, you may think, yeah? But theory is what guides how we do things in a practical world. And at the end of the day, you develop these ideas and concepts and you put them into practice and see how it flows out. And this is what they're doing now. They see a potential challenger for global power. Whether Chinese want that or not is not the point. It's a threat as far as the US is concerned. And they've got to challenge it in whichever way possible. And our linkage with China, so intrinsically, is an important factor in that. And that's where I keep on saying that we, as a country, must think of this country number one first. Before anybody else's interests, our interests matter. And how that may be challenged and how that may be undermined in forthcoming years. We've got to be very intelligent in this. And we shouldn't just jump at the first rope that we get, because that rope may be filled with other things and problems. So we've got to value our relationship with the Chinese, which is since the beginning of that nation, and understand it. But that doesn't mean that we should just disengage with all other countries. And we have to make an effort continuously, and that means sometimes you've got to give some of your small interests away for the larger picture and for the larger share of things that can come.
Last quick comment from all of you gentlemen. Sir, we've been hearing about this word misadventure. You know, if India is planning of any misadventure, we will give them a very befitting response. You know, good enough, sir. That comes from DG ISPR normally. But having said that, sir, is there any probability, because you know, once I was reading this article that there is a possibility, or maybe there's a probability of a small-scale, limited conventional war in Gilgit-Baltistan or that particular area, sir, just to sort of, you know, engage Pakistan or delay a CPEC project for some reason, sir. Is there any possibility, sir?
Well, I think the present policy of India, it's very hostile towards Pakistan, and the line of control, as you can see, and even the working boundary, the way, you know, for the last full 1 year, so many casualties have taken place, and there is a continuous firing taking place. And of course, Pakistan also is reciprocating. So there is always a danger that this could escalate into something, although I'm certain that India and Pakistan both would be very careful not to escalate. But when conditions of this nature exist, and then there could be any incident in Kashmir or elsewhere in India by these militant groups who are very anti-Indian and are very highly disturbed by the way that Indians are treating the Kashmiris, on which we don't have much control, but they think we have, and that could trigger something very serious. So I think we should be...
Or there could be an inside job just to create a reason for that.
Well, I'm not so sure that India would like to sort of also, because it is also focusing on its economic development, so I hope it doesn't engineer something like that. It could engineer to a smaller scale something to give a bad name to Pakistan, but I don't think they will engineer a conflict which could lead to something as disastrous as that as you have in mind. So I am only hoping that the line of control gets more stable, and for that we need engagement with India.
Constant
and I think we must also keep on emphasizing that whereas you know, my colleagues have been very rightly mentioning that we must be cautious and more wise and sensible in our policies, especially when we have such, you know, America and India looking at us with greater sort of bringing greater pressure on us. But at the same time, we have to be prepared and keep on projecting our position, our activities, and be as honest and as transparent as possible in our policies that diplomacy does demand.
All right. Sir?
Can I just quick say, just you see, look at, Jansa very rightly said, look at how China and India resolved, even though standstill, the Doklam issue.
And the Ladakh issue as well.
Why? Because both are emerging economies. They don't want a conflict, you see, which will scare away the investors. This is such something which we need to look at very carefully. One thing more, Indians are not going to do that adventure as you was rightly said. And I'll tell you why. They're already doing it within Pakistan. The support to the extremist elements within Pakistan, we have documentary proof. So, and they have not gone away anywhere. I tell you very frankly, they are all around the country, and you hear them every now and then attacking these people in Balochistan and others. So they're already doing it. We need to look inside those supporters, those Indians who the networks are working inside the country. They don't have to do any adventure.
Sir?
I think we need to emphasize again that that we're in control of CPEC in our parts here. We need to emphasize this is fundamental to the future development of the country. And there's not a compromise on that. But we also need to recognize and push out throughout the world that this is the benefit of not just Pakistan, but the region as well, to integrate the region, to make it stronger, but also to allow other countries to come and invest. Nobody's stopping that. There's a new business on the horizon, and we are it. And we're willing to have lots of different investors here. And we're going to allow for preferential treatment of foreign investors of all kinds to benefit and win and profit. And that's what it really comes down to, doesn't it? Profits.
At the end of the day, you know, if you can raise the living standards of your people,
why not?
Nothing is better than that. Jalsa, thank you very much. Best of pleasures. Thank you very much. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Good office.
Thank you.